in a minute or two. Turns out I forgot to set the reminder email to go out for this webinar, so I just sent one, reminding people about it a solid, I don't know, 2 minutes before the webinar started. Quality move. That's how the fall term often starts for us. So I sent that out. Hopefully we have some people trickle in, about maybe 15 or 20 people in the webinar. So quick note on some logistics while we're letting folks settle in. We are going to be recording this. We will be sending it out afterwards, so you have a recording to play with. We do have, I think we have the chat enabled. Yeah, we do have the chat enabled. So I'd say toss out into the chat, like what school you're from, what your role is, so that we can get a little bit of conversation going between the participants. This doesn't just have to be us talking heads as we're going through. So feel free to use that chat. You'll find it at the bottom of the Zoom screen with a chat webinar or a chat button at the bottom. A little flustered having not sent that email. So, but let's go ahead and do some introductions, and then we will we'll get into the content of the webinar. So for those that don't know me, I don't recognize some of the names, some I do. Heather, Aaron, yes, oh gosh, there's actually quite a few, Robin and crew. So awesome to see you in here. I'm one of the owners of Harmonize. I'm CEO. I'll be doing most of the demoing today. I have with me Alex, who's our new instructional designer, and she can answer any ID level questions that I don't have the chops to answer. And when we're getting into some of the questions, she'll also be helping with the chat. And I have David with us as well, who he runs a lot of our subject-specific webinars, and he'll be in the chat to help people out to answer questions and such. And David will probably be the one sending the recording out after the fact as well when we go through it. So here's your team. David and Alex, it's totally up to you all if you stay on video or not, and then we can dive in. All right, cool. Okay, so things we're going to cover today. So we have a bunch of AI tools laced into Harmonize. I'm going to run this as a side-by-side demo of, I'm going to have ChatGPT open in one window. I'm going to have Harmonize open in another, and we're going to talk through the tool set that we implemented in Harmonize to be able to, build activities, build rubrics, and our newest feature, which is the AI coach for students. So we're going to dive into all of these use cases for them and being able to share ideas of how to use them. I'm going to also be running this in ChatGPT beside it so that you can see sort of if you are more of an AI, I want to interact directly with ChatGPT, you can get a feel for what it is that we're doing. Also, if you don't yet use Harmonize, like if you haven't put it into your class, but you're kind of wondering if you should or not, you still will be able to have some benefit of seeing what the interaction with ChatGPT looks like as well. So I'm going to be doing that side by side as we're going through it all. And then let's get started. Let me open up a couple windows for myself here. Close out the reminder email I was sending a few minutes ago. Okay, actually, real quick question, just so I know what level to speak at. Is there anyone in the chat who doesn't know what Harmonize is? You haven't seen it, haven't put it in your class. You need like the 20-second introduction into what Harmonize is, so that some of the stuff we do inside of Harmonize versus in ChatGPT makes sense. All right, I got at least one 20-second intro. Let me do that then, and then we can share my screen. All right, I'm going to run this inside of Canvas just because that's where most of our teachers tend to be. The features work almost exactly the same. I will cover any differences between them as we go through. But what Harmonize is the flagship product is a replacement for your Canvas discussions. So imagine a discussion forum that doesn't have to be all text-centric, one where you can set up multiple due dates, you can turn on auto grading, you can lead into your class. I saw there's some communications folks and speech folks in the chat as well. Like being able to record videos, record screen shares, build activities with AI, and then when your students participate, each of their participations come in as a card. So that we are highlighting what's happening in a gallery view of what's in your class. That can be imagery, it can be their Canvas profile photo. If they're just writing things, it can be videos if they've recorded them, or videos if they've uploaded them. And we're giving you this view of like, well, where do I want to participate, or where do my students want to participate? We've been doing this for years, and so the tools are quite full-featured. But when the whole AI world cropped up, the question came up of like, well, how do I actually build an activity that that is actually interesting for my students. Like I have to build 10 of these things. I'm building a new course. Can I get some help with that to build a better discussion activity or a better online activity of any sort? So that when we start to get this participation, it's based on a more meaningful initial setup. So that's one of the first problems we're going to start with AI. Uh, and then when we get into this, it's like, okay, well, my students are participating. Let's say I'm coming in and I'm taking a look at what they're doing here. They are, working with the prompt I gave them. They're uploading visuals, they're uploading imagery, they're reacting to each other, they're responding to each other either in video or by critiquing videos and such. One of the other uses of AI that we're going to cover is like, well, okay, how do I build a rubric so that my students are really clear on exactly what my expectations are for this, so that I can then grade with that if I want to. So we can cover sort of both the how did I build the initial activity, but how did I then give those expectations to my students, because it takes forever to build a rubric. So that was one of the other requests we've dealt with. And then finally, the thing that we've done most recently is given all of this content, one of the big struggles for instructors is if I'm teaching 30 people, it's possible I will have the time to get in here like every day and check and respond quickly to the students, but can we actually leverage AI to let the students get real-time feedback based on the rubric we built, so that not only are they participating in a discussion that's got richer media, et cetera, but they're on track. Like they are actually complying with the things you asked them to do in the rubric. So these are pain points we've had for years of like, how do we build a good activity? How do we build a rubric? How do we get students the feedback they need as quickly as possible? Those are the three things we're going to cover today in this short webinar on things. So that is the 20-second interview of Harmonize, the overview of Harmonize. The idea being that it's just easier to participate by screen sharing, by doing video, by doing imagery, interacting with each other, multiple due dates, auto grading, all of these things to be able to help your class just proceed better. But now let's get into the AI side of things. So when I actually come in, and I see Annette mentioned she's on her phone, but she can follow up on her laptop. You're welcome to follow along with me as you go through things. And so that you can participate. So if you already have a harmonized discussion added, you can do so. If not, Alex, do you mind grabbing the instructor help guide and putting it out there? So if people want to quickly grab one of the guides on like how to add one of these to our course, if you're brand new with Harmonize, you can do so. I do highly encourage playing with the tools we're about to deal with, because it's the best way to experiment is to play in my world. Maybe not in everybody's world, but in my world. All right. So I'm going to go into a topic that is essentially empty. When I'm here, I'm looking at this. I have a topic built called AI in the classroom. I've jotted down some thoughts of what I think we want to discuss, but I actually haven't built out my activity. So you can see I have my multiple due dates configured, but I haven't built activity. There's no student, or well, I guess this one has some student participation because it's a bad demo. Pretend that had been empty, and that I'm actually going to kind of want to build my activity here. One of the first AI pieces that we released, and I think the one that has gained the most traction simply because it's been in instructors' hands the longest, is this idea of letting AI help you build a discussion prompt or some sort of activity. So imagine I'm faced with the blank slate of I want to actually be able to add some text in here. Let me clear this out so that it's totally empty. I could write my prompt manually, or I could go copy and paste my discussion prompt from discussions and put it in here. But the AI piece is called generating a prompt here. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And now this is where I'm going to start bouncing back and forth. I'm going to demo this and Harmonize, and then I'm going to cut over to ChatGPT to sort of show you some of the inner workings of the things that we're thinking about. So when you're faced with this inside of Harmonize, we really only need one thing. We need you to fill out the box that says, what do I want my students to discuss this week? This one in particular, I have set up as a personal finance class where I'm like trying to get my students to do budgeting. I want them to create a personal savings goal. I want them to set up a budget. If they throw in graphs, fantastic. Tying it to personal experience, fantastic. The whole idea with AI is just brain dump kind of what your thoughts are. They don't have to be coherent. You can see I didn't even use proper grammar. I probably misspelled words. I don't see any misspelled words, but I often misspell words. Does not matter. The idea is put what you want to teach in here. I have already added a learning objective. You don't have to do this, but if you have a learning objective and you fill it in, we'll be able to do a better job for your activity. So if you have that, great. And we're asking for a complexity level, which I'll touch on in a little bit as well. But the goal is put something in and click generate topic instructions, because we want you as the instructor to have a bunch of ideas put in front of you. Like, here's an activity. Do you like it? Is it close? Is it not close? This type of thing. And this is what you can do with AI. So I can read here. I put in a sentence or two on what I was after. They've actually set up an activity for me, or I should say we have set up an activity for me, describing what we're after, picking a savings goal, creating a plan, adding visual representations, etc. Looking at all this. And then it's up to you as the instructor to say, like, okay, did I love that? Did I hate that? Was it close? Is it anywhere in the realm of what I'm looking for? If I hate it, you can just say, try something different and pick up from the scratch and be able to build something. And it will go build another activity for you. It's kind of like having your personal assistant where you can just be like, nah, give me another one. Nah, give me another one, where you don't even have to be polite. You can just click the button as many times as you want. And then it will, in this case, build a slightly different thing for me. It's a different set of instructions, a different sort of a goal for what we're looking for. And let's say I'm looking at all these and I'm like, all of these are too hard for my students. I can click this start over button and come back in and be like, that complexity level was 3. If you're familiar with this, we'll touch on this when I get into the ChatGPT realm. This is applying your knowledge of Bloom's taxonomy. But I can change this and be like, you know what? I am just trying to get my students to understand information. So I can update it to complexity level 2. That'll be a little simpler for my students. They are not quite ready with the information to be able to apply their knowledge yet. I need to do a little more scaffolding in my class. So I can update that. And then I can start over and say, now generate an instructions for me. And this time, it's going to build something that is simpler for my students to achieve, for them to participate in, where it's actually that just asking them to summarize key points of tracking personal savings goal, how to create a budget, etc. But don't actually build a goal. We're not yet applying our knowledge because I lowered the complexity level for them. The key with this, and the interesting thing with this, is that let's say you are building a course from scratch or you're revamping a course from scratch. You could come in with module 1 and set up an activity where you're having them understand the facts. We're going to run them through an online activity like this one here, where they are going to say, okay, yeah, that's good. They complete it. Week 2, you can use similar content, change the complexity level to apply. And now that your students have understood those facts, they are ready to apply them in some way, in some sort of online activity, and build a whole second assignment that is marching up the complexity level because you just told us to march it up the complexity level. And you don't have to think about, well, how do I build an activity that builds on what I did in module 2? You can just march up the complexity level of Bloom's as you go. And then when I look at this, I can just say, add this to my topic instructions, and then it will bring it in for me to edit. And I can't stress this enough about AI. It might make mistakes. It might do something you don't like. Our whole goal was to get you close enough that you can bring it in and edit it when we're coming through. So I could come through and change any of this wording as I want. I could come through and add, a video recording to make it a little more human as well. I could just be like, oh, here, we're going to talk about personal savings. I strongly encourage doing some sort of personal touch with your students like this. They love to hear from their instructor, these types of things. So even if you are using the AI generation, think about sort of the humanity side of it as well, where your students really want to be able to hear what it is that you're saying. I'm going to stop this. So now I have an activity built where, let me move this video above my instructions because I'm a little OCD here. So now I have the video here, and then I have that activity that we just built here for my students to be able to participate in. When I am doing this, I'm going to come back into ChatGPT and talk about what we're doing so you can understand sort of the how are we approaching this. First off, you can be like, describe the Bloom's taxonomy for me. And it will tell you what the Bloom's taxonomy is. It's going to give you a description of those different complexity levels. This is, Bloom's taxonomy revised. It's going to describe those, what we called complexity levels, but they are actually like solid. I don't know, Alex, how would you, I'm not to put you on the spot, but how would you describe these? Are they different cognitive levels or what with the information?
Yeah, I think there are different levels that students would progress through with any topic. You have to begin with understanding before you can move on to something like applying. So it's something like this, your skill level or facility with the topic.
Gotcha. Okay, so think about and think about where your students are at with the content. They give some examples here of what you can do. We're doing a lot of this for you to where we're just asking for the level, but the thing that we're doing next and what we often get asked is like, or are those activities that you're building for me, are they sound? And so what we're really doing is saying, let's say for the Bloom's level of apply, give me some interaction strategies that work at this level. Um, Behind the scenes, this is what we're doing, where it's going to come pull up and be like, well, here are some things that work at the apply level. We can do games, we can do role playing, we can do case studies, we can do problem-based learning, hands-on projects, lab activities, guided practice. Behind the scenes, this is what we have built into Harmonize, where we've basically said, like, there are a lot of these that work in an online world. Workshops, probably not so much, those types of things. Interactive quizzes, that's not something Harmonize supports, but those that do apply, we actually will take one of those and just churn out an activity for you. And when you say try something different, we're going to pick a different interaction strategy and turn it up for you. So instead of you having to read all of these and be like, does that work for my activity that I'm working on, et cetera, we'll just build one for you. Be like, here, what do you think? And then you can be like, no, don't like that. Next. Okay, how about this one? Build something for you. Next. Okay, no. So that's what's happening behind the scenes over here in the actual prompt generation activity. This I want my students to is Bloom's taxonomy level. And when you pick one of these, we have a whole toolbox of different strategies that we can churn up for you. And every time you click, try something different. Let me say I'm going to generate an activity here. Every time I see what's there and I click try something different, we're going to pick a different strategy for you, put it in front of you, see what you think about it. And this one here, thinking about experience, etc., creating a detailed manual or tutorial. This was similar to the case study type thing. We're going to build a manual about how to build a personal savings goal. You may hate this strategy. Once again, click try something different and go through it. Yeah, Ned, it looks like you were trying to follow along at home. What I would say is just don't worry about following along at home so much. I can talk through this. And then towards the end of the webinar, we can spend a little bit of time of how to add one of these to your course, or if we have time, because I think it's almost more valuable to think about the time savings things it's going to do. And then we have a bunch of webinars coming up that will go deep into how to actually add Harmonize to Moodle, how actually to build it into your class, et cetera. And David, if you don't mind, since you run a lot of the one-on-one webinars, I think you have one coming up tomorrow, right? Is that true? Are you on mute, David? Did David run away?
Yes, I have one coming up tomorrow.
Okay, cool. Can you go ahead and put the registration link for that out in the chat for Annette as well, because then we'll get into a lot of the basics. But this webinar is really like, what can AI do for me versus how do I get all the nuts and bolts of Harmonize to work inside of my course? Awesome. All right. I want to talk about one more aspect of this here, which is one of the big positives of AI is that you can collaborate with it. So I'm going to try something different because I really don't like the build a manual activity. That just feels very dry to me. So now I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, well, here's one that I am looking at. One of my peers missed the recent session and I have to collaborate with them and share my insights and key concepts. So we're actually going to do a group activity. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Appointing a teammate, doing primary post, building a community, et cetera. But let's say that wasn't quite close enough. Let's say I really want a video reflection from my students. If you have little tweaks like that, you can just type them in and click send, and we will rewrite the activity once again to do what it was that you were asking. So now if I go through here, now it's actually asking for a video reflection, showcasing the group's ideas. So you can make these little nudges with AI. You can be like, and incorporate football somehow. You can get as creative as you want to get. I don't know, I'm curious what it actually did here. It looks like it's doing budgeting for a football team now versus doing budgeting versus personal finances, trying to draw those comparisons. Sky's the limit, right? It's easy, it's quick to do. Throw whatever type of connections you think you might want, either into the initial box when you're defining what you want, or here when you're suggesting improvements. The whole goal is to get you once again to this place where you are adding things to your topic instructions, if that makes sense. All right. So I want to see, I should have covered some Q&A such. I see Jay actually already found the Q&A, even though I didn't remind people to put questions in Q&A or chat. So if you have any questions on this prompt generation, we can cover those. Go ahead and put them in the Q&A pod, or if you don't find the Q&A pod, just put them out in the chat, and we can talk about those. We can talk about the different strategies we're doing before we roll into rubric generation and AI coaching. Jay's question, and I'm guessing I might have covered, well, let me see. It says, once the AI generates the prompt, can the instructor edit the text to amend, elaborate, focus, and improve it, or are we reliant only? We always want the instructor to be able to edit this text. So if I go ahead and get my Zoom windows out of the way, so I can actually get to the save button. Too many Zoom windows. If I click add this to my topic instruction, it opens it up in an editor, and you really, really should review and edit and amend this. Our goal is to get you 80, 90% of the way there, iterating back and forth with that. But in the end, like, you need to own this. This needs to be something you're comfortable teaching. So maybe you're like, developing insights. I don't really want you to do this whole thing. Remove the whole bullet point and simplify what it is. Some of the feedback we get is that sometimes it's a little too much work to do in a week. And so you can ask the AI to simplify it and it will try, but often you as the instructor will be like, you know what, I really want to simplify it in this way. And it's easier for me just to edit that than it is for me to try to get the AI to write that for me as you go through. So, okay. Annette, I'm glad you figured it out. It's good self-problem solving there as you go through. Right, I don't see any more questions coming in on this prompt generation side. So do I have anything before we move on? Going once, going twice. All right, cool. I think I actually ended up adding 2 different activities. So you're welcome to do this as well. Let's say you have an activity, you want to put a pin in it and keep it. You notice I clicked that add to my topic activity twice. Here's the first one I clicked it on. Here's the second one I clicked it on. So now I can be like, compare, contrast. Maybe I really hate the football one. These little trash cans let me delete things. So I'm going to delete this one. And then now I have my intro video and that activity that I built. So now I'm down to 1 activity. You always can move things around and delete them with these little trash cans. So now I have a singular activity. I've gone through ideally and edited it to make sure it's exactly what I want it to do. The next question is, how do I get a rubric in place? And I've already built a rubric for an earlier activity, so let me clear that out. How do I get a rubric in place? This is another thing that probably saves more time than the actual activity generation, because if you want a rubric, I don't know general time frame, but it takes you 30 minutes to an hour if you're good at it to build a rubric and type all the words in and all the different description levels. We're going to handle that with AI for you. So let me come over here and actually build an activity here as well. So I have one. I'm going to say like build a personal finance activity at the apply level of Bloom's taxonomy. So you can do this sort of same thing of taking it to the next step of like, oh, I found some strategies. Here it's going to actually do the same thing over here in ChatGPT and build it for me. So it'll build the actual activity here. Just did that so that I'm at the same place in both my ChatGPT window and my AI window in Harmonize. And to be clear, if you're using Harmonize, you don't have to do this. I just wanted you to see what it's like to actually interact with AI, so you can choose to go do this if you want. I see it takes me days to build a rubric. I could see that. It's a lot. So let's talk about building a rubric. To start with in Harmonize, you're going to click Generate Focus Areas. The first thing this is going to do is it's going to look at all of those instructions we just wrote, and it's going to pull out the main 4 things we think you're asking your students to do. This would be the left side of the rubric. And this is now, once again, back to Jay's question of like, can you edit the text? We always, always, always want you to be able to edit the text. And this right here is probably the most important step of the rubric generation to be able to edit. We need to make sure that that this is actually exactly what you're asking your students for, because we are kind of digging into your instructions and trying to figure that out. So you need to confirm that this is what you want. Are you looking for originality and critical thinking and content and comprehension, etc.? You can edit these. These are all text boxes, so you can change anything you want. These little trash cans are similar to the trash cans I used up above. You can throw things away. If we missed one, or let's say you want 5 items, as you go through, you can click Add Focus Area and describe a 5th one that we did not pick up. So the whole goal is to really define for your students what are the 4 main things you're looking for. Once you're happy with this, you can click the Next button, And you have two choices here. Some people really just wanted to be clear with their students. Here are the main 4 things I want you to focus on. But you know what? I'm not going to grade with a rubric. So I just want to show you those 4 focus areas. You do that, you click here, we show those to the student, we don't build a full rubric. Still better for the student because now they know, okay, here's the instructions and here are the 4 things that my instructor said I need to do. However, if you want a full rubric, you click generate full rubric, and now we're actually going to build the 4x4 rubric for you. We are going to take that definition of clarity and presentation that we talked about, and we are going to define what excellent means for it. We're going to define what poor, missing means for it. And it's going to be very customized to these instructions here. Once again, always ability to edit. These little pencil icons here will allow you to edit this thing, change the point totals, change the text, etc. And then when you're finally happy with all of this, you can save that rubric. And we will present it to the student like this. Here are the 4 areas. If you want, you can view the full rubric, and this is what it looks like. In Canvas, we go one step further. We will actually put this into Canvas as a full-blown rubric to be able to link to outcomes and to use in SpeedGrader. If you're in the other LMSs like Moodle or Brightspace or Blackboard, you can still grade with it. You're just going to be using our grading interface, which you'll be accustomed to, big grades button, easy to follow along with. The only thing that doesn't then work in Blackboard is, let's say you wanted to link it up to outcomes in Blackboard. We don't have the capability with Blackboard to be able to put it into the rubrics section of Blackboard. So there's one of the first differences between the LMSs. In Canvas, it becomes a full-blown rubric over here in the left-hand side for everything you can do with the rubric, and it gets linked up into SpeedGrader. In the other LMSs, it's just available for grading. When I'm doing this in ChatGPT in general, I can be like, build a 4x4 rubric for me with that activity. ChatGPT will actually go ahead and build a rubric for you in this way as well. Couple differences. Well, one is you have to copy and paste all of this in to be able to do the actual building of the rubric inside of whatever LMS that is, whatever LMS you're using. All of the rubric tools by and large are kind of painful, which is why we always make it available for you and put it into Canvas when we can, or these types of things. But here it is for you. You can then copy and paste each of these individual things. This is just like I could have probably asked it to define the criteria for me more carefully and gone back and forth with it on the criteria before it took the step of building this actual rubric. And then taking the step to be able to copy and paste these things into one of the rubric builders in the LMS. So the same thing's possible here. It's a little less thorough, and you'll maybe have to go back and forth and fight with ChatGPT a little bit because we put a lot of prompt engineering on top of it to make it do what we wanted from a how do you build a good rubric perspective. But if you are trying to do this as well, you can straight with ChatGPT. So now I have a rubric. It put the explanation of the criteria down here versus putting it in with the table, so you can still copy and paste that stuff in as well. Coming back here. Any question on rubric generation before we get on to, I think, what's the truly fascinating step, which is coaching students with all of this content. See if anything new has come in on the Q&A. No, excellent. Okay, can you go back to the first button you clicked when making a rubric? Absolutely. I'm just going to delete my rubric because it's that easy to build rubrics. When you come here, the step to build the rubrics is immediately below whatever activity you have built. It's called generate focus areas. And we start with generate focus areas because that you may not build a full rubric, you may just build the focus areas. And when you come here, this is when we're going to dig in and figure out those 4 main things for you to be able to build the actual rubric. And you can go back and forth through this process. Let's say you build the whole rubric and then you're like, it turns out I really should have tweaked that more. You can go back and go back and forth with it. So say I came here and I was like, yes, generate the full rubric. I can go back, tweak one of these items, come back and click the little regeneration button next to the rubric. So if you thought you had clarity and organization design the way you wanted, but once it actually built what excellent meant, you're like, oh, you know what, there was some ambiguity there. You can go back, edit that, and then come back, regenerate. Oh, no, wrong button. go back and click the next button, and then click this little regen button here to be like, okay, I edited that. I'm going to regenerate this row of the rubric. So you can go back and forth and iterate. You will avoid a lot of work for yourself, though, if you just spend a little bit of time thinking about these focus areas when we first presented them to you as well. The same thing is true if, let's say, let me go ahead and save this whole thing. Let's say I was looking at this and I'm like, you know what? That is actually not perfect. I need to add something to my instructions up here. You can update this and actually regenerate the focus areas if you change your rubric and change your instructions and start the whole process again. So you can go back and forth on this. I'd say the happy path through, though, is click it once, make sure you've nailed this in terms of what you want, that this does represent what you're trying to do, move on to next and save the rubric. So now I'm going to close this. We now have a rubric built. So what this means now, where are we at? We have a good activity, and we have a very, very clear definition of what you as the instructor are after from your students. So now your students know clear expectations as well as what all of the different levels of the rubric mean, so that there's no ambiguity over what they should be doing. What we find is that students don't read the rubric all the time, or they don't spend the time to truly think about each of the items. They need a little prompting. Maybe they don't know that they didn't quite nail clarity and organization. So how do we give students that real-time feedback so that they can iterate and do sort of self-learning, self-assessment? I read the rubric, I've been pointed at this part of the rubric, and I need to do better here. How do I do better? Go do some more reading, go do some more learning, come back, try again. How do we get that process to happen over the course of like 5 to 10 to 15 minutes or an hour versus I submitted it, my instructor is going to come on later that day. They have 30 students. Maybe they don't give me feedback until later that week. And now I've already moved on as a student. I've either given up and started on the next assignment, or I just, whatever it is, they are not going to come back to that content. So we want to tighten that loop. We want to make sure that they have the feedback they need when they need it, so that by the time the work gets to you as the instructor, it's more thoroughly thought through. All right, so having said all of that, that's what this little switch is here at the bottom. If you want the type of AI coaching I'm about to show you, and you have built a rubric, all you have to do is click this switch, and now AI coaching for students is enabled. Let's go show you what that looks like when we're going through things. So I'm going to go back into my modules. I'm going to go into a topic called real-time student coaching. This is an activity I've built already so that I could build a couple of sort of mediocre responses to the activity. Once again, back in the personal budget, just because that's what I was building the activity for. I have this built. I have a rubric built for this. And if I log in as the student, coming into the student view for things, I'm a brand new student to Harmonize, so it's going to give me a tip on how to create a post. I don't need that because I own the company, so I actually know how to create a post. I'm going to come in here and say create new post. So this is my post as a student answering the activity. And then here's a kind of a mediocre response to the post. Student can do whatever they want here. They have a bunch of editing tools to be able to upload things. But because I flipped that switch on the rubric, we have this new UI right above their publish button that says, do you want AI feedback? There's a little question mark here that'll take them to a video to be like, what the heck does that mean? We'll walk them through what it looks like, et cetera. But the goal is to click this. It's going to scan their work using my rubric. It's going to take their work, take the instructions, take the rubric, and it's going to take a look at it and be like, you know what? You're really low on engagement and peer interaction. You haven't done any of that yet. I'm like, well, that makes sense because I'm only posting. I haven't commented yet. But, you know, what about clear and achievable savings goal? It says some room for improvement. That's good. What does the rubric say? The rubric says this is what success looks like. This is the focus area for the rubric for clear and achievable savings goals. So I read that and I'm like, did I achieve that or not? So I come back up here, I look at what I'm doing and I'm like, I see what it's saying. Like, I probably should have done more than that. So I then have a mediocre, slightly better answer to that post where I've done some revisions now. I think I've made it better. I can come down here and say, rescan my work. It's going to do the same thing now. It's going to take a look at where I was at, where I'm at now, what did the rubric say? And it's going to be like, hey, there's a little room for improvement now. And it's got better. Like you actually did, you know, the trend is increasing. You did a better job. You drove it to be better. The rubric here under engagement and peer interaction actually got a little bit better. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, what? I didn't do any peer interaction yet. It's like, but part of that rubric criteria was that the primary post summarizes the group's discussion effectively, because part of this was getting together as a group and talking about things. Well, when I redid the assignment, it did a better job of that, so that this actually got better, even though there's still a lot of room for improvement, because I'm supposed to respond to my peers' posts, I make sure they're constructive, comparative, etc. I haven't done any of that yet. So this is where the main area for improvement now is. And super important, there will be things that we will refuse to coach on, because if we are not confident that we can ethically coach your students on it, we are not going to try. And so the students will get used to this idea of like, okay, I coached on this criteria and I coached on this one, but effective use of visual aids. Well, first off, I didn't put any graphs and charts in, but we didn't even try, because we're like, AI cannot yet determine if you actually did a good graph and effectively used the visual aids to be able to do what it is. So we will label things as human assessment. Sometimes that you think maybe we could have, we're erring on the side of caution. So for example, the submitted budget is detailed, includes all required categories. Each category is thoroughly explained. AI decided that there was some chance it could make a mistake here. We went through a whole series of behind the scenes work to figure out, was this something that we are confident we can coach in? And the whole nature of comprehensive is kind of where it bailed out. It was like, I don't think we can do that successfully, or maybe we can, but we don't want to take that risk. So we've labeled that as human assessment required, left it alone. And so we will coach the students on the things that we're confident we can coach on. Okay. Reading through here, I see some stuff coming in the chat. Let me take a look and see if that's where we're at right now. From Nicole, tip, not Harmonize, but the best way I found to get HS, high school students, I'm assuming, HS perhaps, to read a rubric was by having groups use the rubric to assess something I personally wrote. They read every word of the rubric when it can be used to find flaws with their teacher. I love that idea. That's actually pretty awesome. That would be an interesting activity type, would be like build a rubric, and like your first post is to assess my work. Your second post, your second milestone would be to create your own work. And then your third could be to self-assess your own work against the rubric to be able to see what it looked like. That's fascinating. I love that. Yeah, so any questions on what we're doing here, what we're trying to accomplish? And then I'll get into a little bit of when we think this can be useful versus when you should perhaps not turn this on. I want to see if there's any questions coming in first. Okay, give it a second. No questions. Let's talk about when I think this is. So first off, this is brand new, right? This is, I don't want to tell you I know how this actually is going to work for your students, whether it's going to achieve what you want it to achieve, because frankly, AI is relatively new, which is why it's an optional feature you can turn on. What we hope happens and where we think it is useful, and we are looking for feedback from you all when you go give it a try. We think that it will be useful in formative assignments where you're more concerned about the learning process than you are about the end result. Like you're really trying to get your students to thrash around with the content. Like our definition of success is that we made the students stop and try to revise their work. And hopefully it got better when they revised it. We'll be tracking a lot of these things so we can see if how it's going. And we will show these to you. I'll show the instructor view to a moment to you so you can see what that looks like. But the goal is to get them to stop, think, and try to revise their work before they publish or after they publish. They could publish one post. They could scan again, edit, go back and edit that post. They could scan again and then go and create a whole second post. Or they could scan again and then go in and create comments and then scan again. The whole goal is like, if we make them spend more time with the content, reading the instructor's rubric and looking at their own work, we consider that a success. So if you have an assignment type that you really want them to be spending more time on, or as Nicole said, actually read the rubric, encourage them to use this. Be like, hey, I've turned this feature on. You can use the get AI feedback to point you at parts of the rubric, and then I'll, at the end, I'll jump in and give you my feedback on what I actually think you did. For example, these two criteria here, you would need to give feedback on because we're not going to be able to give that feedback. That's where we hope it will be used. Areas I would stay away from, like we do private assignments, so you can do capstone projects with this type of stuff. I would not turn on coaching for those because you're really interested in the end result at that point, and you want to be the one assessing the work without them having that feedback of, did I do citations? How was my grammar? Did I actually do what the rubric asked? All of those types of things. I would stay away from that here because then you won't be able to as easily see what the student was capable of. I would also stay away from this if you are heavily doing video or imagery as part of your assignment. If you're teaching a photography class and you're talking about composition, don't turn this on because we are going to label pretty much everything in your rubric as human assessment required. How was the framing on the photo? I don't know, human needed. How was the color composition? I don't know, human needed. This is all text-based. So if your students are responding in text as at least part of the assignment, then you can use this. If your assignment is almost entirely non-text based, AI is not yet capable of doing that for you. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this and show you as the instructor what you will be able to see about these particular students. I'm going to open up SpeedGrader. This is for those that are not in Canvas, this is the Canvas grading interface. Looks very similar to yours. And this panel here is exactly the same. If you're in one of the other LMSs, this right-hand panel will be a little bit different for you than it is here in Canvas. First and foremost, you get a new button here. It says View AI Feedback Results. When I click on this, it is going to show you every time I've scanned what we told them and let you go back through the scan. So it's going to show you the most recent scan first, where I said basically little room for improvement, human needed, much room for improvement. I can march back in time and see everything we told the student. Got better, got worse, got better, got worse. This is a demo student, so I scanned 13 times. We don't expect this to be the norm, but there were times where I scanned almost an empty post and it was like, not enough data. I don't know, there's nothing there, type of thing. So you'll see all kinds of different feedback, and you can kind of see how often the student used it, when they used it, kind of how much time did they spend between things as they were. So trying to give you the information of how did they use the tool, how often did they use it. You will notice we don't put that front and center. We don't say 13 scans because we don't want to bias you by letting you know that the student, in order to achieve this work here, actually had 13 different scan attempts to make it there. We want you to take a look at the student work and see what you think when you're then grading with the rubric over here on this side. So you can view rubric and then click to grade with the rubric over here. If you're just coming back to teaching, Canvas redid their rubric interface. This is the new Canvas rubric interface. Looks a little bit different. So that's not a Harmonize thing. That's a Canvas thing they just changed. So you might want to take a look at that before you dive into grading. Close that. But we're putting this here so you have the information, but it's not front and center. We want you to first look at the student information so that we're not anchoring you to think like, oh, they did really poorly on this engagement and peer interaction type of thing. Like, let me go back through these and see what they did. We'd love you to make your first assessment versus trusting entirely what we're doing. The reason we say this, and the thing we often get asked is like, wow, you did all that coaching. Can you automatically score a grade for me? And the answer is no. It's not accurate enough to do that. It's accurate enough for us to tell that there's much room for improvement, but it's not accurate enough for us to say, oh, that's a 27.5 on that rubric criteria. And in fact, sometimes it will fixate on one particular rubric criteria and coach a little more aggressively there than other areas. And we have no way to know that it's doing that entirely. And so it's really you as the human that needs to come back in and do the final grade. Like, this will definitely cause the students to think and point them at weak areas so that they can reiterate with the work, et cetera, et cetera. But filling out this field over here is not something that AI is good enough to do. There's a bunch of studies that have dug into this. So we as an engineering team dug into this, but also a bunch of folks have researched it, and you just get too much variation based on if the person was writing about inner city life as their example, it will score them worse than if they were writing about upper middle class suburban lifestyle. The same biases that we as humans often have are present in AI, and so you have to be really careful when it comes to something as important as assigning a grade to a student. Okay, got about 15 minutes left. I'm happy to go touch on some of these other topics. I don't have the ability to do what I just showed you in terms of coaching inside of ChatGPT. That's a way more complex interaction to be able to take the rubric and coach students on it, et cetera, et cetera. So Do I have any questions, or is there anything you want me to go back and revisit? Or if you're new to Harmonize at this point, I could walk through and show you. We have enough time left. I can show you how to add one of these to your course so you can get to the point of start working with these AI tools as well. Feel free to put in the chat if any of those appeal to you. Put in the Q&A if they appeal to you. I see Susan asked a question in the Q&A that I ended up covering and didn't see. Can the instructor see how many times they use the AI feature? Yes, for sure, here with this view AI feedback button as well. So how does auto grading for discussions work? So real quick on that, because this actually can be used with rubrics. I didn't think of this, some other instructors thought of this, but the way our auto grading works is it's based upon raw participation. And so we have this idea of multiple due dates of what we want our students to do and when we want them to do it and how much we want them to write. So I can say, for example, I have one post I want it in by September 26th that's worth 75 points. I also can configure it to be like there's 300 words that I want you to write for that. And what that means is if they get that post in on time and it has whatever word count I associated with it, it's going to give it the points, 75, regardless of quality of the work. They literally could have written blah, 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 blah 75 times. But because we are simply grading on quantity of content, we can put a grade in for that. And it's very clear what we're doing. Hey, student, you achieved this. You wrote the requisite number of words. And now the instructor is going to give you your final feedback. What we see instructors do, which I think is pretty cool, and I had not thought of it until an instructor recommended it, is that when they are actually in the grading interface and they are looking at, let me pull up a student who has some work here. When they're looking at a student who's actually done some work, they will come through, they will let it, do its auto grading, and then they'll come back through and actually change the grade. So I could overwrite this and be like, I want a 90 for James versus 100 because he didn't do everything I was asking him from a quality perspective. We are seeing instructors actually generate a rubric, leave auto grading on, because in these formative assignments, 75% of the students get 100%. They did what they needed to do. The 25% that didn't, how do we get them good feedback? And the best way to give them feedback is to use the rubric. And so they will actually come through, and I don't have a rubric configured on this one, but they'll open up the rubric and then grade the students who they don't agree with the quality was at 100% level. They will give them feedback via the rubric, click, 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 save. Now the student has a rubric assessment of their work. The grade changed, which we can talk about in a second, but the student knows why it changed and they have feedback from the instructor showing it. So it still saves a decent amount of time because you don't have to give a grade to the 75% of the students who did everything. You just have to review it, jump through and each student make sure it looks good. But for those that you do need to give feedback, you can then use that AI generated rubric or your own Canvas rubric to be able to come through and click and grade. So the two can be used together. Some of the LMSs have a way to not release the grades for students until you want to do it all at the end, in which case you could actually set in Canvas. It's Alex, what's it called in Canvas? Grading policy, is that right?
Yeah, it's the posting policy, which you can set as manual.
Okay.
Too.
And so you could set that to manual so that then the auto grade comes at 100, you grade with the rubric, bump it down to 85, and then at the end you release all of the grades to the students all at once, so they never see the fact that the auto grade gave them 100, you knocked it down to an 85, they only see the 85 with your feedback. So that's possible in some LMSs. I don't know if the LMSs other than Canvas have that type of release policy or not. So we see all of these combined together. Right, other questions for us? Alex, can you actually grab the Help Center for those that, since some of these folks are new to Harmonize, to be able to give them the full-on Help Center of. So what she's about to give you is here's everything about Harmonize, like setting up a discussion, here's some articles, doing grading, here's some articles, using AI, here's some articles. And she also put a couple of the articles on coaching and generating rubrics out into the chat as well. Those are also accessible from this main page. So if you only bookmark one thing, it's the Instructor Help Center. And what that's going to look like is this. It's going to say, like, I'm creating a discussion, here's some articles. I am wanting to get more into that AI thing. I can click on this AI in the left menu and it will show me generating a rubric, brainstorming instructions, coaching students, etc. As you're going through. Annette, since you're still refreshing yourself as well, some of these, like how to set up in Moodle up at the top here, can you go through that as well? And Susan, the auto grading is definitely a Harmonize feature. It's not a Canvas feature. And when I come in here from this help center, there's this area called use auto grading, which will then tell you how to set up milestones and turn on auto grading and those types of things. Alex was quick enough to get that article out for you as well, so you can see what that looks like. And they'll talk about some of the nuance of how the auto grading works, like when does the grade flow into the grade book, when is it available in SpeedGrader, when is it available in the other LMSs, those types of things as well. But this help center is your friend, because every time you get into something, it'll kind of give you what is the next thing you can do. Like, oh, plagiarism detection, does my school have that? Those types of things, because we do Turnitin integration for the discussions as well. I guess that's an area of AI I didn't cover. We do integrate with Turnitin if your school has it. If your school has enabled the AI detection part of Turnitin, we will do AI detection, AI writing detection on your posts. I would caution you with that in that it is not 100% accurate. So if you do go down that route, there's an article in here about detecting plagiarism or AI use by students as well that will show you how to actually go in and edit it and turn it on. And then if your school has it, you'll see it. But once again, it can be incorrect. Like if the student re-summarized their post with Grammarly or something like that, it's still their content. The grammar is nicer. Is that AI writing? It might detect that as AI writing, and then there's some nuance there you need to unpack. So keep that in mind when you're working with it as well. All right. 10 minutes left, but I don't have any more things to cover unless there's more questions to go through. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap it up? Do you have any useful arguments for getting instructors to use this? Some instructors are resistant to learning new tools because of not having time to learn new programs and worry it will integrate seamlessly with Canvas. Like, will they have to log in, Harmonize, et cetera? Yeah, we actually, so two of our main tenets are more engagement in your class, but also saving instructors time. So when we are trying to entice instructors, because they're all busy, right? Every instructor has too much to do to start with. So we often lead with some of the features of like, well, okay, this is, you can do AI detection, you can do auto grading, you can generate activities, you can coach your students, all these things that are going to save you time. Will bring instructors in. I'd say the number one thing that brings instructors in is the multiple due dates, because they're like, I'm so tired of the procrastination, like discussions don't work because they all come in 5 minutes before the due date. The multiple due date feature is one that allows that to be fixed. So every instructor is different as to why they want to approach something. Those are the arguments we make when it's purely a time, I'm stressed, I don't have time to learn new technology. When we're talking about different subject areas, like let's say communications is a great example. Like the fact that we can do screen share and share a PowerPoint and record videos or whatever straight into the discussion makes for a way different conversation than what happens in Canvas discussions. And then, allowing those students to draw on each other's PowerPoint slides and leave timestamp commentary. So there's some natural fields that just lend themselves to doing this, and it's a much easier conversation. Same thing for foreign languages, like doing video and audio recording straight in, slowing those down so you can listen more slowly, doing your conversation practice in an asynchronous fashion with tools like this. So anything you can think of that's like video or screen share that would be nice for a particular field is a very compelling point of view. So it kind of just depends on every instructor is different. Some have some time to deal with technology and are looking for the why. Would I do this in my foreign language class? Others are like, I come in for the time savings, but oh wow, this is actually better once I get into it, type of thing. Okay. Any other questions? See, we have about 19 people left in the room. So I guess let me leave you with our support address would be the final thing as we're looking at questions. Actually, Alex, can you grab the support address and then I'll take a look at Annette's question. So just a thought, I practiced psychology for 32 years. Teaching is my second career, so I've not had the background in education. As a teaching novice, I found Harmonize was very time-saving and helpful, so others may too. Awesome, Annette, that's fantastic. Yeah, I love quotes like that because that's what we're after. The idea is like, that Bloom's taxonomy stuff that I talked about, if you haven't been trained in education, you have no idea what all that stuff means. And how do I write an activity that lines up to my learning outcomes? Like, I don't know how to do that. And I've been around technology and education for a long time. So until we get these AI tools, it makes that part easier. So it's like, oh, build an activity, line it up to your learning outcome, voila, type of thing. Then you can just be the subject matter expert. That's kind of our goal. Like you as a teacher, most teachers, in fact, in higher ed are not taught to teach. They are like subject matter experts galore. Like they know so much about your particular topic, whatever it is you're teaching. And so can we shoulder some of that burden of like, what is the education pedagogy we're trying to achieve here? What does that look like? How do we get that rolling? And then that way we can just let you loose and let you be the subject matter expert to be the human in the classroom and be interacting with them. And I will say, like, end of course surveys go through the roof when we are, you know, let's say I'm grading this particular student here when they did a PowerPoint and yada yada. If I'm going to add a comment to it and I'm going to actually just kick on the video recorder and be like, hey, James, great work. Love what you did here. Fantastic. I really loved your use of the cartoons and the fact that you recorded a PowerPoint and you recorded a video and all these things, James. That's fantastic. Love what you did. Everybody in the class, pay attention to this. This is a great example of how to succeed. That took me 17 seconds. I think that's how long I spoke. So the students loved that because they got to hear from their instructor. You were present. You lent your subject matter expertise. You lent your sort of your power of your voice to it. And that type of thing is trying to make it easy so that your students love it. And Sarah says that video feedback is clutch, so much faster than writing. I speak way more quickly than I type with a lot less misspellings because you can't tell when I'm misspelling when I'm speaking, although you can hear my grammatical errors still. So this is I think a big win here. And when you're if you're not familiar with Harmonize, this is SpeedGrader. So you could do that over here as well if you just wanted to leave a private comment. They just added this the ability to record videos and auto caption a private comment to the student. So even if you're not using Harmonize to do it, but if you notice here, I was talking to the entire class, which kills two birds with one stone. I gave feedback to James. I facilitated the discussion. The entire class benefited from it without having to leave the grading interface because this over here is the live discussion. So I could leave that video feedback for everyone to benefit from, or I can mark it as private. Traditionally, the private stuff is done over here in Canvas. If you're not using Canvas, you then use this interface to do private comments as well and be like, well, I don't have the ability to do that in Moodle, so I'm going to record a video with private feedback to James being like, dude, don't cheat, or whatever I want to say to James that's not shared with the rest of the class. You can just mark it private over here. Excellent. I'm going to run because we have more meetings because that's how fall term always starts. So I hope your fall term goes well. David threw out a link to a bunch of webinars that are coming up. Things like how do I get my students to read more content? We have a PDF annotation and a polling tool we're going to be going over. I think that one's later this week. We also have some Harmonize 101s that he put a link out to a little earlier. So you can come and get the full blown, tell me everything about Harmonize to start with. We actually are going through a webinar about how to do video specific critique and stuff. I think that one is tomorrow. It's called the Flip webinar because Flip was a tool that a lot of people were using to do video conversations. It shut down unexpectedly by Microsoft. And so now everyone's scrambling. So we're teaching a bunch of our instructors how to replace Flip with Harmonize. That's video critique, presentations, timestamp commentary, that type of stuff as well. And that's on that link that David put out there as well. And then David has a very cool one about how to teach math online. That's not coming up till October, so that's a little bit of time on that one, but he's partnering with a couple instructional designers that talking about the theories of how to teach math and have discussions on math in an online asynchronous format, which is going to be very cool. Awesome. All right, thanks everybody. I will let you go. We'll send this recording out once it's done processing and such, and hope you have a good time. Bye.